If you have a true scary story you want to send my way, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. While I was attending an out-of-state university, I lived in one of their dorm rooms. It was cheaper than trying to find an apartment or roommate that I could get along with, so I went with living in a dorm with someone hopefully I could tolerate. That worked out well enough when I was roomed with this guy that I'll call Mark. Mark was an alright guy. We weren't best friends. In fact, we had some pretty major differences, but we could agree to disagree and tolerated each other well enough. Sometimes we would talk, waiting for the time to pass. We'd pick up something from the gas station, or food for each other, so I guess we did alright. But Mark also seemed to keep some things to himself, which was understandable. We all want some kind of privacy, right? Mark had a small safe that he kept under his bed. I'd watched him pull it out at times and open it with a key. It was one of those heavy, fireproof safes, but probably one of the smallest ones I'd ever seen. I guess it did need to be small enough to hide in a dorm room. Like I said, he kept it under his bed. He always seemed to hover over it, or shield it when I was in the room, pretty obviously not wanting me to see what was in it. So I just tried to be as respectful and look away or turn around, like that was my intention all along. So he felt like I wasn't being nosy. I absolutely was, but I wasn't going to act on anything. I assumed he probably just kept money or maybe jewelry in it or something like that. Judging by the way that he dressed and the things that belonged to him in the room, I assumed that his family was pretty well off. But then Mark's demeanor began to change. He was rarely home, and when he was, he didn't stay long. I liked to go to this local pizza and wing place on Tuesdays, and we would both chip in. But 2 weeks in a row, he said he didn't want any. Fine, sometimes you get burned out on things. But it was this situation that made me raise an eyebrow. The first time I asked him, he looked like he wanted to say yes, but kept looking at his watch, almost contemplating the time. He didn't normally have anything to do on Tuesday nights. No classes, and I know that he didn't have a job, which was another reason I assumed he was being supported by his parents or guardians. I suppose he could have just had something to do that night, but he didn't look normal, I guess. Like, when you're normally trying to decide if you have the time to do something, or trying to calculate how long this or that might take, he looked more like he was nervous. Like he had an important deadline somewhere else, but was really torn about leaving. It's hard to explain. I just told him it was no big deal, that I would still get what he wanted that time, and he said thanks as he was rushing out the door. Weird, but no big deal. But the next week, he looked even more flustered. He didn't even seem to realize what day it was, but when it finally clicked, he declined and quickly left. Both times he was carrying his duffel bags, so I assumed he probably started doing something better with his time instead of eating greasy pizza. So I let it go, sometimes inviting another buddy over to split the cost. But then there were other, more suspicious events that occurred involving Mark. When he was trying to get into his safe, he would ask me to leave the room. At first I looked at him confused, but he seemed suspicious. Maybe even paranoid. It nearly became a full-blown argument, but I was fed up and just left. Several times it could be sitting at my desk doing work. He would clear his throat, and even though I had no idea what he was even doing, I would have to go into the bathroom, or leave the dorm room. And quite frankly, it was pretty annoying. But again, I lived with it until he started getting way too possessive over anything on his desk or his duffel bag. He kept a padlock on his duffel bag. I assumed he just had his gym stuff in it, what the hell could be in it that was worth locking up? One day, I had come back from class, and as I was entering the door, Mark was at his desk. He quickly shoved whatever he was writing into his drawer. I remember rolling my eyes, annoyed that he was all of the sudden so secretive and paranoid. I actually confronted him about it, and it turned into a small argument. I just remember him looking at me with his eyes glossy and wide as he slowly shook his head. "You have no idea who I am. You know nothing about me. I would suggest that you stay in your lane, man." I scoffed and asked if that was a threat, and he said, "No. Well, at least not one from me." I ended up leaving again to cool off, not wanting to deal with him. I just let what he said roll off and ignored it. Mark was a pretty small guy. I definitely wasn't afraid of him, but I also didn't want to be involved in whatever he was doing. Something that was common at the uni that I went to was the illegal sales of a certain RX that's supposed to help you focus. I assumed that he was getting involved with that. I wasn't going to say anything. It was a known problem, and staff and security were already looking into it, so I found no point in it. But I was not going to be treated like I was the problem, so I did ask about changing dorms. Unfortunately, they were full, so they just put me on a wait list. I figured that I would just grin and bear it. But things escalated over something pretty innocent. There was an odor in our room that seemed to come out of nowhere. I thought maybe something went bad in the mini fridge, so I cleaned it out, but the smell still lingered. For days, the smell stayed in our room. I opened the windows, I went and bought a few air fresheners, and when those didn't work, I cleaned the whole room. I threw a lot out. I smelled all the bed sheets and blankets, but even though they didn't have the smell, I threw them in the trash bag and put them out in the hall, planning on taking them to the laundromat. One of the last things that I did was clean under the beds. If there's one thing my mom taught me, she was a housekeeper and a nanny, it was to clean from the top down. So it was last on my list. I pulled a few things out from under my bed first, none of which were causing the smell. And then I hesitated when I went to Mark's bed. I knew that he at least kept his safe under there, and I feared if I started cleaning under it, he would show up and another fight would ensue. So I tried to see how much time I may have. I texted Mark asking him if he was coming back right after class, and if so, if he could pick up some orange juice on his way back, explaining that I had to toss the one that we had, which wasn't a lie. He agreed to do so, which told me that I had a few hours before he would be home, and I decided to go for it. I lifted his mattress, and the smell seemed to get stronger. I saw a few wrappers, a paper plate with something small stuck to it, but it was also not the source of the smell. However, I did lock on to that notorious duffel bag. I didn't realize it was under his bed. I thought Mark kept it on him with how paranoid he had become, but I guess if it contained what I thought it did, he probably didn't want to carry it out and risk being caught. But at that point, curiosity was taking over, and I wanted to know what the hell was in that bag. Why did Mark all of a sudden change? Why was he so secretive? And what was in that bag and his safe? The only problem was that the lock was still on the bag. It locked the two zippers together, so after looking at it for a few seconds, I figured I could probably pull them apart about an inch, and maybe finagle it enough to pull the zipper between the two and shine my phone light into it to see what it was. I grabbed my phone and crouched down, reaching for the zipper, when my phone went off. I was getting a call from an unknown number. Not that it was a number I didn't have saved, but the number was unknown, blocked, anonymous, however you want to look at that. I wouldn't normally answer those, but in the situation I was in, it seemed too convenient. so I answered it. The voice was low and gruff. "Leave it alone. It's none of your concern. He told you that, didn't he?" Then the line went dead. I had no idea who that was. Couldn't recall the voice at all, but that was the least of my concerns. My bigger problem was he referring to me messing with the bag? And if so, how the hell would they have known what I was doing? We did have a window, or two, actually, but they were higher up and wider, because they were above our beds and close to the ceiling. The floor that we were on was kind of underground, so our windows were practically near the ground. Think like basement windows. So the only way someone would have been able to see me from the window would be to have been squatting or laying down by the window. No one was around the windows, and I also would have seen them or heard them approach. This was in the fall, so I would have heard the crunch of the leaves as they walked by the window. I immediately threw the mattress back down, leaving everything where it was, the plate and the wrapper too. I sat on my bed thinking about what just happened, and I looked around the room. That's when I noticed that Mark's laptop was still sitting on his desk, open. The screen was dark, but I noticed that his webcam was open and that the light was orange. I had the same model of laptop, and I knew that the light being orange meant that it was on. If I wasn't on edge before, I definitely was now. Was I being watched? And by whom? Surely, if Mark was watching and saw that I was under his bed, he would have just called or texted me, right? But that was definitely not Mark's voice. All I knew was that I did not want to be any more involved than I already was, so I left. Like the disembodied voice said, it's none of my concern, and I'm leaving it that way. I brought Mark's bedding back in and put it back on his bed to make it look like nothing was out of place. Then I packed a small bag of clothes and some necessities, grabbed my bedding outside, and I left. I called a friend from the laundromat and asked if I could crash on their couch for a few nights, because I sure as hell was not comfortable staying in my dorm anymore, and they agreed to let me. Once I got to his place, I explained what had happened, and he thought that it sounded a lot worse than just some pill sales. He suggested that he may have even been involved in some kind of dark web stuff, especially since the webcam may have been on and watching. He told me that I should really consider telling someone about it for Mark's safety, and reluctantly, I finally agreed. I called security anonymously, and my friend did the talking. That way they wouldn't recognize my voice. He didn't go to the same school that I was in, and he told them about a bad smell coming from a specific room, and mentioned seeing someone matching Mark's description with a suspicious bag. They said they would look into it, and that was the end of it. I stayed with my friends for a few nights before trying to go back to the dorm. I did get a call while I was there, however, asking me if I had seen Mark, and if he had been acting strange. I confirmed that he had been, but said that I had no idea why. But I did mention the smell. They said they didn't smell anything, so I went back to the room that night. To my surprise, the smell was gone, along with most of Mark's stuff. His computer was gone, the safe and bag under his bed were also gone. There was a jacket in the closet and a basket with some random clothing in it that he left, but that was it. After seeing this, they asked if he had mentioned anything about leaving, and I said no. They thanked me for my time and then left. After everything, the room felt way too eerie, so I went back to my friend's house, unwilling to stay there. I don't know if it was worse when his stuff was there or after it was empty. But to make things worse, to add to everything that's already happened, I was stopped by campus security and a cop as I left one of my classes. They started asking me questions about Mark once again because not only did it look like he moved out of his dorm, but he had also missed a few classes. That's when I finally told them everything that I witnessed. I know, call me a coward for not telling anyone sooner, but since he was still around, I didn't think it was any of my business to say anything. I also didn't want to be looked at as a suspect, but now that he seemed to be missing, I knew that I needed to buck up. They thanked me for my time, and that was the end of it. I kept the dorm as a way to store my stuff since I had to pay for it anyways, but I could not sleep there, or stay there longer than a few hours. It freaked me out too much. I never heard from or about Mark again after that, and I have no idea where he is. I hope wherever he went, it wasn't because of the shady stuff happening, but it's hard to imagine that he just got up and walked away from it all. In the end, I honestly just hope that he's okay. It was my first year at college, and I was going to be experiencing dorm room living. I was pretty well excited about the idea of having my own place, but still having just enough social interaction to pull me out of my shell. I wanted to be a teacher, but the idea of being around a lot of people, or even having everyone staring at me, you know, what you would expect while being a teacher, it gave me anxiety. So I was hopeful that I could break that. It started out great. I had a roommate, a girl named Sarah, and I feel like I really lucked out with her. She was nice and thoughtful. She never got loud and didn't have any unexpected guests over. She invited someone over that was working with her on a project. She asked me if it was okay if her boyfriend came over, which I appreciated. We always warned each other when we were going to be cooking something. We even had a microwave and a small toaster oven, and she even respected that I was allergic to apples. She loved them, but if she had one, she would stay away from me and take her trash directly to the bin outside. Like I said, probably the best roomie that I'd had my time there. The story's not about the dorm mates, though. This happened on a Saturday night. Well, more like evening. It was around 4 p.m. or so. Sarah said that she was going to stay with her boyfriend that night, so I was going to have the place to myself. I liked to paint in the little free time that I had, so I was working on a picture I had started a few weeks earlier when there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I assumed it was just one of my friends stopping by, or maybe Sarah was returning for something and forgot her keys. She actually often left her keys in the dorm because I was either typically home to open the door for her, or she was admittedly ditzy and just forgot them. So, I got up and opened the door without hesitation. However, instead of a familiar face, I was greeted by a man that I had never seen before. He introduced himself as Zachary, and said that he was a maintenance worker, claiming that he needed to check something in my room due to a leak, pointing upstairs. He was wearing a dark blue jumpsuit, and he had a name tag that said Zachary on it, so it made sense. Not having any reason to not believe him, I let him in without a second thought. I shut the door and continued to stand by the door as I watched him roam around the room. He took something that looked like a high-tech laser pointer and aimed it at the windows in the room. He would then pull out a piece of paper and a pen and scratch something off. It didn't seem very professional, a crumpled piece of paper and a pen, but I digress. He starts in on some small talk, probably just trying to make the situation less awkward, which I appreciated at first. He asked me what I was majoring in, and I told him. He asked me some other innocent questions, like if I was from Tennessee or if I came here for school, how I was liking it, just things like that. It was working, at first. He used a flashlight in crevices, door frames, not even looking at me, and I just rambled on, trying to be nice, too. But then his questions started shifting and making me uncomfortable. He asked me if I had a boyfriend, and I said no. And then he said with a chuckle to his voice, "So no late night sneaking out to let loose in the boys' dorms?" I didn't know how to respond. Like I said, I was kind of shy, and it was difficult to hear my friend talk about her love life. And this random stranger wanted to know about mine? I just let out a nervous laugh and said no. He then turned to face me and asked if I at least partied, saying it was one of the best moments of college life. Doing things you won't remember so you can't regret it. I again replied no, and that I didn't like parties. He put his flashlight back into his pocket and continued to look over the room, like a kid does when they go to a new store. He didn't look like he was examining anything, more like scoping the place out. I was getting pretty nervous about all of this, and was ready for him to leave, so I asked him again, "So, what exactly are you looking for?" He didn't answer me. He just slowly walked closer to me and said, "You know, you're a pretty girl. Bet you get a lot of attention from the guys." I refused to make eye contact with him and was just hoping that he would leave already, or that someone else would show up. Something. Anything to get him out of my room. I was now terrified. Was he really with maintenance? And if so, why was he saying things like this to me? Why wasn't he worried about me complaining about him? That was the question that really made me think that he wasn't being honest. Why would he risk his job doing this? I swallowed hard and asked him if he was done because I needed to go meet up with some friends that were expecting me, hoping that if he knew that I was expected somewhere, he wouldn't do anything else. He just made like a clicking sound with his mouth, so I looked up to see him smiling. He made sure to get as close as possible, purposefully brushing his arm against my chest, even with my arms crossed, and said, "Of course you do." He walked out the door, winked at me, and said, "I'll see you around, Michaela," and then walked down the hall. I watched as he looked around the hall, like he was studying the doors, and then walked out the front door. I kept the door locked, and if anyone showed up after that day, I checked the peephole before opening the door. I was worried that guy might show up again, and I wasn't feeling comfortable enough being alone, so I asked one of my friends to come hang out with me for the night. She wasn't doing anything, so she came over, and we decided to watch a movie. When she got there, I explained what had happened. I told her on the phone that I wasn't comfortable being alone and explained the creepy maintenance guy that showed up. She looked at me funny. "I don't think maintenance works on weekends unless there's an emergency." That didn't even cross my mind. He didn't even really go into details on what the issue was. Hell, he didn't even specify what the leak was for. Water? Gas? A draft, maybe? I just assumed it was water. He looked at the windows and in the corner of the walls and door frames. Like where cracks could be, I guess. So what was he looking for? My friend told me that I should report it to security, or at least an RA so they could confirm the validity of the man, and I agreed. I called them the next day, and to my horror, he confirmed they only do maintenance orders on the weekend in emergencies, and they had no orders the day before. So I reported it to them and gave them a description of the man. They also checked with their maintenance people, and none of them were named Zachary. So I literally just let some random guy into our dorm room, let him look at our stuff, and be a creep towards me. I felt so stupid and freaked out. What were his intentions? The RA told me to keep the doors locked and that if someone claims to be maintenance or facilities, that I could call at any time to confirm if they had someone coming. They also told me to ask for their ID, as they should all have one on them. I told Sarah what all happened when she came back on Sunday, so she knew what to do if he came back when she was home instead. Several weeks went by, but I never saw the guy again, nor did Sarah. I was thankful, but every time there was a knock at our door, it put me on edge. However, while we didn't see him again, he apparently tried to do it again to a different room, but he screwed up. They actually did have maintenance come in shortly before that guy showed up, and the girl questioned him about it and refused to let him in. He then tried to force his way in, so she started getting really loud to make a scene, and it worked. He finally backed away and took off. Security caught him in the courtyard and brought him in until the police arrived. I was then asked to confirm if it was the same guy, which it was, and Sarah said that she knew the girl that questioned him, so she got to hear the other side of it too. We learned that the guy used to go to the school, but that he did some other similar and questionable things, so he ended up getting expelled. This time he was charged with trespassing, and we haven't seen him since. His picture was actually hanging up in multiple places, asking people to speak up if he is seen. I guess the charges finally made him realize that he wasn't welcome there. I just hope that he didn't try anything like this somewhere else. This was something that happened to me about a decade ago. I was going to college and living in a dorm room, which was part of a scholarship that I got. I was very lucky to have gotten the scholarship, so I was looking forward to such a great opportunity. Not to mention, I would be the first one in my family to go to college. But I was also very nervous. It was in a different state than my home, so I didn't know a single soul there. But I was determined to not let it get in the way and to do my best. When I arrived, I had a roommate, but it was only for the first month or so. She moved out after that, giving me the place to myself, with no immediate roommate moving in. It was pretty nice. While my roommate was nice and spoke to me, she was very adamant on what was hers and her space versus my own. So, once she was gone, I had a lot more room and I didn't have to worry about my desk being too far over on her side or something. My room was pretty quiet, just the occasional music or movie playing in the background. The college that I attended has day and evening classes, as well as other extracurricular activities, so you could hear the other girls coming and going down the halls quite frequently. Sometimes it was just walking, or a door closing. Other times, you might hear them yelling at each other, be it playful or arguing. Fights definitely happened too, but they were usually over before anyone could call for security. I bring this up to explain that, unless you were whispering in the halls, everyone could hear you in the rooms. The walls were super thin. On the night of this event, I was in my room watching some movies on my laptop as I worked on some homework. It was late, maybe 10 or 11, and I could feel myself starting to nod off. I contemplated just finishing it in the morning and just falling asleep when, out of nowhere, I heard a woman screaming. This wasn't just a friendly, startled scream that I often heard in the hallways. This was a blood-curdling, grab your phone and dial 911 kind of scream. I jumped right out of my chair, nearly falling over trying to stand. I stood frozen in place for a second, trying to grasp if what I heard was real. I was watching a comedy, not some horror flick, so I knew it wasn't from the movie. I ran to my door and looked out the peephole first to see if I could see anything, but nothing was there. I slowly opened the door and peeked my head out to look around. I wasn't willing to just run out in case someone was out there and saw me, giving them a face and possibly a reason to come after me too. But again, I saw nothing. I saw the center stairs, the cardboard cutout that's been sitting by them since I got there, and nothing else. Maybe the scream came from the floor above. The dorms had 2 floors. I was afraid to walk up there, but was also worried that someone was in danger. Who knew what could be happening? I hesitated for a moment, debating my options. Should I try to find the source and head upstairs, risking my own safety? Or should I just go back to my room and call for help? In the end, I opted for the latter, going back to my room and calling 911. I explained to them what I had heard, and the operator informed me that they would send someone out to look around, and asked for my address so they could speak to me with any additional questions. The cops arrived shortly after, and they knocked on my door. They asked me to go through what happened again, and then they left, saying they would look around. I went back inside, anxiously awaiting for them to come back and telling me that they found something, but then I heard knocking on the other doors and people talking. I opened my door to see 2 cops and campus security talking to girls in 2 other dorms. This, of course, got others' attention, and slowly you could see just about everyone else opening their door, curious as to what was going on. I was kind of nervous, maybe embarrassed that all this was happening because of something I did, but I knew it was the right thing to do. But I could have gotten past that if they did end up finding something. But here's the thing. They didn't find anything. In fact, no one else said they heard anything either. The cops came back to my room and said that they didn't find anyone hurt or in danger, nor did they see any signs of something happening. They said they also asked around and that no one else said they had heard a thing, but how was that possible? They asked me to go over what happened again, and I explained down to a T my steps. I think I even narrowed down what question I was on my homework when it happened. They said that they would make a report with campus security and follow up with them if something does come up, but otherwise told me to call again if it happens, or if I see something, and left. I was baffled. There was no way that no one else heard that scream. It's not like the place was riddled with crime, and that no one spoke up out of fear of something either. I considered maybe it was a prank, but then again, that would mean that everyone else had to be in on it because they all denied it. And I found that hard to believe. I wasn't picked on or messed with in any ways, so why would I have been singled out? The next day, an RA came and talked to me about the incident, and I once again explained it to her. She personally said she spoke with multiple people that denied hearing anything, but that she also believed me. She said that she knew I wasn't the type to make prank calls like that, but we had no proof. I was conflicted at that point. No one else claimed to have heard anything, and there were no signs of foul play, which was great. There were also no missing persons reported. Everyone was accounted for. So what did I hear? I made a few friends while attending that college, and they all believed me, but also told me themselves that they didn't hear anything. And now, many years later, there are no answers to what I heard. No one went missing, no bodies found, not even anyone going to the hospital after being attacked, so I'm still at a loss. I want to believe that I imagined it, but it was just too real for me to brush it off myself. I just hope that whoever it came from, I hope that they are okay. So that, my friends, was a collection of some scary dorm room stories. First time I've ever done a collection like this, so hopefully you guys enjoyed them. I guess this could have been kind of scary roommate or scary college stories, I guess would have also fit, but they were all specific to the dorm rooms, so I think that it works better as a dorm room stories video. Yeah. Some definitely creepy stories. Always bad stuff whenever the dark web is mentioned, and then always bad stuff whenever you got a creep pretending to be maintenance, and then disembodied screaming. It's just like a non-stop roller coaster of just bad stuff, so yeah. Creepy stories. Thank you to those of you who submitted your stories or allowed me to use your stories from wherever you posted them. It is genuinely appreciated, as without that kind of stuff, without these submissions or allowing me to use stories, we wouldn't have Sorry, there was a weird noise from upstairs. I think it was Patience. But it sounded like she was using a drill. I don't think she would be using a drill. Odd. I'm gonna ignore it. Anyways, oh yeah. So, without submissions or permission, I wouldn't be making videos, right? Yeah. My train of thought is gone because of a weird drill sound from upstairs. I don't know what it was. She was playing Don't Starve whenever I went down here to work, so I don't think she's drilling anything in Don't Starve. I don't think that's how that works. The mysteries of life. I'll have to go upstairs and figure out what she was doing. Unless it came from next door. That happens sometimes. Anyways, I'm getting off track here. If you enjoyed these stories, please do hit that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider subscribing. If you feel so bold, go below the video and leave me a comment letting me know your thoughts. How are you doing? How's your weekend going? How do you plan to spend the rest of your week? My birthday's coming up, so that's part of my next week. I'll tell you guys never it's my birthday, because there will be a video on that day, so meow. And then tell me, if you ever had a creepy dorm room experience or college experience. All of my college experiences were night classes, I was on campus, or online classes, so no creepy experiences. There was a dude or two that were just creeps, but they weren't creepy to me, obviously. Never stayed in a dorm room, so I don't have any experience with that. This topic is not one I have any experience with, really, so hopefully y'all enjoyed it. You can also join Patreon memberships to get early access to content like this or other stuff depending on how you sign up or what you sign up for. You can also do a super thanks, which is just a tip to the channel. Never expected, but always appreciated. And all of that fun stuff, my friend. I hope you're having a beautiful week so far, and I hope you do have a beautiful rest of your week. But until next time, remember you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And until I see you again, much love, and sleep well.